And welcome everybody once again to our 215th episode, the first one in our summer series for 2025. So welcome everybody. I'm glad you found us and joined us today. Jessamyn Foley is joining us to talk about aquatic invasive species. She's the watercraft inspection supervisor up in our Brainerd Lakes area office. So Jessamyn, thank you for joining us today and sharing your passion and knowledge about AIS and watercraft inspection. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Benji, and thank you for having me here today. Like Benji said, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about aquatic invasive species and watercraft inspections. So I will go ahead and get started here. What we will cover today is we will be covering, we'll go over what invasive species are, what the definition is here in Minnesota. We'll talk a little bit about the objectives of the Minnesota DNR Invasive Species Program. We'll talk about some management and prevention strategies, working with enforcement, some regulations that guide our work. I'll cover a little bit of Invasive Species 101 that gives you some identification, methods of spread, and impacts of some of the invasive species we are dealing with here in the state. I'll talk about watercraft inspection and decontamination and how to work best with inspectors out working at public water accesses and why it matters and what you can do. So invasive species are non-native species that have to meet both of these criteria in Minnesota to be considered invasive. They cause or may cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health, or threaten or may threaten natural resources or the use of natural resources. This is a scientifically based definition. It's not arbitrary. All invasive species tend to have multiple characteristics that do make them invasive. They have fast growth, rapid reproduction, lack of natural predators. They're very flexible, so they're kind of generalists in what they eat and where they can live. And all of these factors combine that they really have the ability to displace the native species in our lakes. So if you think about it for a minute, when you think about invasive species like buckthorn or the invasive silver carp pictured here, they really kind of create an environment where it's all one species or a monoculture. Where you think about some of our other non-native species, things like pheasants or lilac bushes, even though they're not endemic to Minnesota, they do live here, but they are not invasive because they do not meet those criteria. So getting into aquatic invasive species in the field of work that watercraft inspection targets, aquatic invasive species are going to be either plants, algae, fish, invertebrates, or pathogen, which can include bacteria or viruses that live in the water and are invasive. So how did these aquatic invasive species get here? Well, first of all, it depends kind of on the species. For example, like aquatic invasive species like zebra mussels came to the US in cargo ship ballast water, which you can see pictured here on the left-hand side of your screen. They traveled between Europe and the Great Lakes through the St. Lawrence Seaway and came in when ships discharged the ballast water from across the ocean. Other things like rusty crayfish actually are native to the United States, originally from the Ohio River Basin, but they were not native to Minnesota. Most likely they came up here because they were used as bait on a water body here in Minnesota. So how do they spread once they get here? There's many ways of spread. AIS can be spread by moving water-related equipment, such as your boat, your personal watercraft, boat lift, docks, and others, things that move from one water body to another. Also, they can be spread by things like aquarium release, for example, or from like ornamental gardens, accidental introductions, things like that. But we do know that human actions are the primary means of spreading invasive species. So the DNR has an invasive species program, and we have some goals in that program to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species, mostly from new things coming into the state and from containing aquatic invasive species or invasive species where they are in the state. So we have some management practices to deal with that. The management practices reduce the interference of use with natural resources. They help to restore native species in their environmental conditions, and they reduce the risk of spread. Some strategies that DNR uses are public awareness events, so things like this, and then also doing other things like outreach events, county fairs. You'll see us at the Minnesota State Fair, and a variety of different public awareness events throughout the state. We also utilize grants for special projects, including the AIS Prevention Aid Grant. We also use enforcement. We have penalties for violations in state laws, and they help us enforce those laws. Inspections, we provide public watercraft or public water accesses. We inspect equipment for aquatic invasive species and for compliance with the law. We also have volunteers that provide education to the public, and we have regulations. Some management strategies for aquatic invasive plants that we have goals with those management strategies to allow access and use in our lakes, increase the natives, and improve water quality. And all of our management practices are based on science. In this photograph here, you can see DNR staff pulling starry stonewort from Grand Lake in Stearns County. When we talk about working with enforcement, one of the things that watercraft inspection does is we work side by side with our enforcement officers at things called roadside checks. In this photograph you see pictured here, you can see a roadside check station set up. On the picture on the left here, you can see the orange sign that is directing all vehicles transporting water-related equipment to pull into an inspection area. While we are working at the roadside check, we inspect all boats traveling one direction. We work with conservation officers there and also zebra mussel sniffing dogs that help us along the way. As a side note, in 2024, DNR conservation officers provided 10,345 hours of AIS enforcement education. We also had 3 zebra mussel sniffing dogs, canines that assisted conservation officers in the field and with watercraft inspections. And the DNR has added 3 additional zebra mussel sniffing dogs at the end of 2024. These dogs are also utilized for a variety of work, including search and rescue and firearms and other things that conservation officers need in their work. As far as regulations, the Minnesota DNR does have regulatory authority over aquatic plants, animals, and terrestrial invertebrates. If you refer to Minnesota Statute 84D, that's where you can find all of the laws and regulations regarding aquatic invasive species. In this law, it does define 2 different classes of aquatic invasive species. One is a prohibited invasive species, and those are invasive species that a person may not possess, import, purchase, sell, propagate, transport, or introduce. And regulated invasive species as well, which is a step down kind of. Those aquatic invasive species or invasive species can be transported. You can even eat some of them, but you cannot introduce them into the waters of the state. So the next slide here, I'll show you some pictures of prohibited aquatic invasive species. So here you see pictured is the faucet snail, New Zealand mud snail, bighead and silver carp, round gobies, zebra mussels, flowering rush, purple loosestrife, starry stonewort, Eurasian water milfoil, and curly-leaf pondweed. All of these aquatic invasive species are prohibited, meaning that you cannot have them in your possession. You can't do anything with them. You simply cannot have them at all. The next slide here will show you some regulated aquatic invasive species in the state. Here you see the spiny water flea, the rusty crayfish, Chinese and banded mystery snails, yellow iris, Brazilian waterweed, and water hyacinth. So with this regulated status, a person can possess them but cannot import them. And if you think about it for a minute, things like the rusty crayfish, you are allowed to harvest those with a regular fishing license in the state of Minnesota, and you can certainly take them home and have a crayfish boil. Chinese and banded mystery snails are commonly found in aquariums, and things like the yellow iris, Brazilian waterweed, and water hyacinth may be kept at home and contain water gardens, but may not be introduced into a free-living state. We'll talk a little bit here at a couple of the species that I just mentioned. First off, the very well-known and highly talked about zebra mussel. The zebra mussel is a freshwater bivalve or mollusk, meaning that it has two shells and it produces something called veligers, which are the microscopic larvae of the zebra mussels. A fun fact about zebra mussels, a zebra mussel can produce up to 1 million offspring in a single year, so they're extremely prolific, and those veligers are microscopic. So that gets us into a little bit about the means of spread. Adults can attach to water-related equipment, and they can actually survive out of the water for up to 21 days in ideal conditions. And the microscopic larvae can spread just by transferring water or mud. Some of the impacts that you guys can think about would be that they outcompete native species because they are filtering the water, and they are highly efficient filter feeders. Sometimes a single adult zebra mussel can filter up to 1 liter of water per day. You multiply that by the number of zebra mussels in a lake, and you can only start to get an idea about how quickly they can outcompete those native species. They also can clog equipment, so they can clog like your water intakes, boat motors. And they're very sharp shells where your kids or yourself could even step on them and cut your feet open. Secondly, I'll go over a little bit about our spiny water flea. And if you remember a minute ago, I had mentioned the spiny water flea is in that regulated category, meaning that you can have it in your possession, but you cannot introduce this. And you may wonder, well, why would anybody want to have a spiny water flea in their possession? So it is pretty small. So they only get to be about 1/4 to 5 inches in length. And so they can be hard to find every single last one of them and remove them. So that is one reason why they may fall in the regulated category. So when you're out fishing on known spiny water flea lakes, it's important to make sure that you inspect your equipment to remove those before going to another lake, because as they are regulated, you cannot introduce them to the next lake. They do have a very long single tail with small spines attached to it, where they get their name. They're a type of zooplankton, and the way that they spread is that egg-laying females attach to equipment, and those resting eggs survive the transport and introduction to a new lake if they are kept wet. So drying really can help prevent the spread of these. And then those resting eggs hatch out new spiny water flea in the next body of water. Some impacts that they have is, again, they're feeding on that base of the food chain, and you'll see this repeated a lot with aquatic invasive species. So they're out competing native zooplankton and other species for food in the water system. One of their favorite foods to eat is Daphnia, which is also a food that our small fish are dependent upon for a food source. Here you see invasive carp. Two different types of carp are pictured here, big head and silver carp. Silver carp can jump about 10 feet out of the water when they're disturbed by the sound of watercraft. They are a filter feeding fish, so again, feeding on the base of the food chain, and they get very large. Big head carp can weigh up to 110 pounds, where silver carp can weigh up to 60 pounds. A key identification of these species is you can see that they have very low set eyes and an upturned mouth without barbels, so they do not have barbels. The means of spread and introduction, they were actually originally imported from China for use in aquaculture ponds to control plankton, and they spread when the Mississippi rivers flooded allowing them to escape from the aquaculture ponds where they had been originally introduced. So their impacts are as they outcompete native species for fish and mussels for food source. Big head carp and silver carp can eat their body weight each day in algae. And then obviously with those silver carp jumping up to 10 feet out of the water, that does cause a risk for potential injury. Eurasian water milfoil is a feathery dark green leafy aquatic plant. It grows very quickly. They do say that it can grow up to 2 inches per day. The leaves do occur in whorls of 3 to 4 along the stem with 12 to 21 pairs. So if you imagine that leaf, if you pulled a leaf off the stem, you would look at the leaflet pairs that go up the stem and you would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you get a higher number, 12 to 21 pairs of fine thin leaflets, that is an identifying characteristic of Eurasian water milfoil. The way that it spreads is simply just a fragment of Eurasian water milfoil carried on your boat or trailer or any water-related equipment can start a new infestation because it does not need roots or seeds or anything like that to spread. The impacts are is it forms very dense surface mat, so it grows up to the surface and then continues to grow and creates like a mat on top of the water and has thick underwater stems, and that can outcompete native plants and disrupt the food chain, alter the habitat, clog waterways, and impede recreation. Oops. And finally, I'll talk a little bit about starry stonewort, which is one of the newer aquatic invasive species that was found in Minnesota in August of 2015. I had just looked up the infested waters list last night and noted that there are 31 lakes that now have starry stonewort on it within the last 10 years. Starry stonewort is not an aquatic plant. It's actually a macroalgae, so it does not have a root system. It's kind of a grass-like macroalgae. It is native to Europe and Asia. It was originally discovered in the St. Lawrence River Basin in 1978, and we do have known infestations of it out on the eastern coast, but it has now made its way into Minnesota. The way that it is spread is through the unintentional transfer of the starry bulbils that you can see pictured here. And then also small fragments of it can also spread new populations of it. Again, very similar to Eurasian water milfoil, it forms very dense mats that can impede recreation and change ecosystems and displace native plants. So now that we know a little bit about some of the different varieties of aquatic invasive species, we can talk a little bit about what our program is doing to help prevent the spread of things like starry stonewort, zebra mussels, and some of the other aquatic invasive species I've mentioned. Minnesota DNR's watercraft inspection program is within the invasive species program. We're within the Division of Ecological and Water Resources. There's 4 administrative regions within the state. So you can see on this map here that I am the Region 2 program supervisor, and there is a supervisor in each region, administrative region of the DNR, and hopefully you can take a look there and see who might be your local DNR watercraft inspection supervisor. With our program, we also have a coordinator in St. Paul, Tina Fitzgerald. And then we also have trainers that go out to do the training for all of our local government partners' watercraft inspection programs. So with the watercraft inspection program, you might be wondering or thinking, gosh, there's a lot of invasive species out there. Why are they out there doing this? And a little fun fact is that only 8% of Minnesota's 11,842 lakes and 6,564 rivers are identified as infested. So yeah, that's not a perfect number, but it gives you a little bit of perspective statewide on why we want to make sure that the public knows what to do with their water-related equipment so that we can continue to try to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. Some history about our program. We were founded, originally, we were created in 1992 in response in response to legislation proposed by the DNR, Minnesota Lakes Association, and angling groups. So we've been around for a long time. And the goals were to prevent the introduction of new invasive species into Minnesota and to prevent the spread of invasive species within Minnesota and to reduce the impacts of invasive species on Minnesota's ecology, society, and economy. We do this work through a combination of activities. It's primarily done through education and then combined with watercraft inspection and watercraft decontamination. Although we were founded in 1992, the law became strengthened in 2011, and that's when we started seeing authorized inspectors out at the public water accesses that were given the authority to visually and tactily inspect water related equipment. So now that they can do that, inspectors additionally can prohibit the launching or operation of water-related equipment into any lake where they're working if a person refuses to allow inspection or if they are not in compliance with aquatic invasive species transport laws. They can also recommend or potentially in some cases require decontamination prior to launching. So I've talked a little bit about 84D, which is the invasive species laws. And just so that you're a little bit familiar with it, anybody who's transporting water-related equipment or operating watercraft within Minnesota state boundaries, the compliance with 84D is an express condition of operating and transporting that watercraft. And so because of that, and that's where inspectors get their authority to be able to require those inspections or the authority to deny access. But really, on that end, you know, they're primarily out there just trying to get the education out. You know, they don't want to have to refuse anybody access to a lake or anything like that. Ultimately, they just want you to know the right thing to do so that we can work together to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. So what can you do? You can simply follow our clean, drain, dispose laws. So that means clean all visible aquatic plants, zebra mussels, and other prohibited invasive species from watercraft trailers and water-related equipment before leaving any water access or shoreland. Drain, you want to drain any water-related equipment by draining your bilge, your live well, your bait well before leaving a water access or shoreline property, and keep those drain plugs out while transporting watercraft. And dispose. So any of your unwanted bait needs to be disposed of in the trash. It is actually illegal to release bait into a water body or to release any aquatic animal from one water body into another. And little interesting fact, with those earthworms, there is no native species of earthworm to the state of Minnesota. And so even those earthworms should go in the trash. They really can cause a lot of damage to our forest ecosystems by reducing leaf litter on the surface and creating an unideal climate for our forests to continue to grow. And then a couple of other things to be familiar with. That dry rule is really important for any time you're transporting docks or lift or installable equipment from one water body to another. You want to make sure that if it's been in a lake, that it sits out on dry land for 21 days before moving to another water body. And if you can remember back to that zebra mussel thing, remember I said that they could live out of water for up to 21 days? Well, if you think about those docks or lifts, there's a lot of nooks and crannies and places that we can't see. And so this really allows that full 21 days for any potential zebra mussels that may be present to die before being transported from one lake to another. There's some additional recommendations that you can dry your watercraft for 5 days in between lakes. You can also follow that spray using hot water, high pressure on your water-related equipment to remove any potential threat of aquatic invasive species. So things to think about that you should drain. Where's water hiding in your boat? Well, it's going to be your engine, so your outboard or your inboard engine. In your personal watercraft, you're going to want to start that up out of the water and give a tap on the throttle to expel any leftover water inside. Your live wells and bait wells should be completely drained out. If you have ballast tanks on your boat, those should be completely drained and verified that they've been completely drained. Your bilge, and then also your bait buckets. So let's think about bait buckets for a minute, because I usually get a lot of question about that. What if I want to keep my bait? So here's how you can keep your bait and transport it in accordance to that 84D. When you arrive at the access and you're ready to take that live bait out on the water, you can go ahead and do that. But keep in mind that when you come off the lake, regardless of what your live bait container is, you're going to want to drain that out and replace it with fresh water that's been either kept in your vehicle or is in a sealed container. So you're going to dump that out, and then you're going to go ahead and replace the water, and then you can take your bait with you to the next lake. If you are finished using that bait, remember that you should dispose of it in the trash. So let's talk about meeting watercraft inspectors out at the public water access. Inspectors do work for both DNR and local government units. Anytime you run into an inspector at a public water access, they should be introducing themselves, explain who they are, who they work for, and what they're doing. And then they're going to perform the inspection. So if you want to be prepared for an inspection at a public water access, a couple of things that you can do would be to confirm that your drain plug's out, make sure that your watercraft is free of any plants, animals, mud, make sure to check your live well and bait wells for waters, and then you can get out any equipment that may have contacted the water. So if you've got anchors that you use or any other type of equipment that makes contact with the lake, you can pull those out to speed up the inspection process. Also, inspectors may ask questions to gather information for our program. This helps guide our program and develop risk assessment for lakes and rivers. So a lot of times it may feel, if you've encountered an inspector multiple times, they're always asking you, what lake have you been on last? How long's your boat been out of the water? What lake are you going to next? All of this data really makes a big difference in determining where we send our staff, and what the risk level is of spread of aquatic invasive species. One thing you can keep in mind, though, is all those questions the watercraft inspectors are asking you, you are not required to answer those questions, but you are required to allow them to visually and tactily inspect your watercraft. Also, they may be asking you to have a decontamination unit. Sometimes they have a decontamination unit available on site. Other times they may not have that there, but there may be certain instances when your watercraft meets our guidelines for having a decontamination. Some of these times it's a recommended decontamination, and then other times it would be a required decontamination. So some things that put your watercraft at risk for spreading aquatic invasive species are the things you see listed there on the screen. Anytime your watercraft is in a lake for longer than 24 hours, anytime you're switching lakes within 48 hours, if you have the presence of aquatic invasive species on your watercraft, or if you have plants that cannot be removed, or mud on your boat, or water that just can't be drained. Maybe you've got a clogged drain plug or a live well, or you've got ballast tanks that cannot be completely drained. They may ask you to do a decontamination if your watercraft meets any of these criteria. And it's really a great opportunity when we've got a watercraft on site to go ahead and take advantage of that. Those watercraft inspection or decontaminations really are the best way to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. They do happen, like I said, at the public water access. They are performed at those public water accesses by an authorized level 2 watercraft inspector. We do have a courtesy decontamination page that you can visit if you would like to have a decontamination. Even if you're not planning on launching your boat at the lake that day, you can certainly go ahead and check out our courtesy decon page. That QR code pictured there will take you straight there, or you can visit the web page there. On that page, you can certainly take a look at where we have decon units stationed throughout the state. You can go ahead and click on the location. You should get a pop-up bubble, and in that pop-up bubble, it will give you the date, the time, and a phone number to call before you travel. It is very important that if you have a longer drive, or maybe it's not even that long of a drive, but you really would like to get a decon, to call that number, because I can tell you decon units break down and people get sick, and we try to keep the map as up to date as possible, but sometimes things change very last minute. Another option for decontamination would be, we do have 4 hire lake service providers throughout the state. You can visit our website to learn more or to find a permitted lake service provider. So what to expect during a decontamination? The level 2 will determine what type of decontamination needs to be performed on your watercraft. Most decontaminations can be completed in 10 to 15 minutes. It may include things such as an external flush of the hull, an internal flush of live wells. We will flush your engine. We can decontaminate the equipment that's made contact with the water. And if necessary, we would use a high pressure spray. So inspectors and everybody working together really is the best case scenario for Minnesota and aquatic invasive species. You can do your part. You can take this pledge. I will clean and drain my boat, trailer, and gear before leaving any water accesses of the state. Make sure that you share the message with your friends, encourage them to go ahead and make this commitment as well, and make sure that you know that we thank you for doing your part. You can also make a pledge on our website. If you go to mndnr.gov, you can add your name to the list. You can also take a look there and see who else's name is on the list. Your pledge, public pledge on our website, really demonstrates your commitment and care to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species in Minnesota. Another thing that you can keep in mind is that sometimes you may encounter something new in a lake that you regularly visit. You may not know exactly what it is, but if you think you have found a new infestation, you certainly can visit our contact an expert link here. It's also been provided in the chat. You can look for your local aquatic invasive species specialist, give them a call or send them an email with maybe photographs of what you found. Keep a sample of it. Of course, if it's a prohibited invasive species, that might not be an option. So really your photo is the best deal. You can also sign up for EdMaps, which is another way that you can report new findings out on the lakes. If you are already on a lake that's known to be infested, you can verify that either using the infested waters list, which the link is provided here. You can look up that list. There's either a map version or a spreadsheet version, and you can take a look to see if we already know that invasive species is in the list. Also, the public water accesses should have orange invasive species alert signs at them with stickers on them that provide you with what we know is already in that lake. Also, if you ever use our Lake Finder Finder app to look for public water accesses or get information about lakes that you may be planning on visiting. We do post on that website as well what is known to be in those lakes. A big deal with this is if you are reporting an aquatic invasive species, if we have early detection, we can potentially develop a rapid response plan to a new aquatic invasive species infestation. Also, I talked about invasive carp a little bit earlier. I will just say that if you ever suspect that you have caught an invasive carp, those carp must be immediately reported to the DNR. This is the phone number that you can call. The instructions is to obviously take a photo, keep the carcass, keep it cool. Don't freeze. After you call that number, they will help you make arrangements to transport that carp to the nearest DNR office. If you are in an area or if you would like to keep that carp to use it for personal use, there is a way to do that. There's a special permit with instructions on it on how to possess prohibited invasive species of carp as well. So some final thoughts to wrap it up. Of course, aquatic invasive species affect everyone. It impacts a wide variety of activities that we hold near and dear to our hearts here. Fishing, recreational boating, swimming. It impacts businesses and utilities, landowners. And so keeping that in mind with this, we want to try to stay positive. You know, invasions of aquatic invasive species are not inevitable. We can each do our part to help stop the spread of aquatic invasive species by following the law and even going above and beyond and using those recommended actions. Continue to work with your friendly watercraft inspectors out across the state. If you find something, report those new sightings as soon as you can. That allows us to get started on some type of response plan if there's the potential to keep it from spreading. And then there's still a potential to manage further spread of many aquatic invasives in this state, especially thinking about the long list of aquatic invasive species that has not arrived here. You know, your individual actions can and do make a difference, and your individual actions will be observed by other members of the public, and hopefully the more people that see you doing the right thing will want to do the right thing, and we can all work together to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. So with that, thank you so much for listening to me. I think I've got some time here for some questions. So if you guys have any questions, I'm certainly willing to take those at this time.
Jessamyn, thank you so much for sharing all that. Super important message. I've said it 100 times when I go into schools and talk to other groups that education is kind of our greatest secret ability and a weapon against some of this stuff, and just spreading the word. If everybody that was on this webinar today tells 2 or 3 people and demonstrates good behaviors at boat accesses, hopefully we can keep the 92% of our lakes and waterways that aren't infested. We can keep them that way and keep them open and having fun, so we can recreate on them and fish on them for many years to come. So
yeah.
So if anybody does have any questions, we did put a bunch of links in the chat there for that Jessamyn was talking about during her presentation. So if you want to click on any of those and save those to your computer or in your browser for later use, you're more than welcome to do that. And I think you did such a good job. Nobody's come up with any stumping questions to present to you yet. So we'll give them a few minutes though. So we were talking a little bit, kind of the highlights about, going into Canada, and they're super strict about bringing your boat into Canada for inspections and whatnot. Do you want to touch on that just a little bit while we wait for some questions?
Yeah, I certainly can do that. You might have seen it recently in the outdoor news here a little bit, and some things to be aware of is, watercraft must meet Canadian clean, drain, dry standards in order to pass an inspection, or you could be refused entry. I'm sorry, is my screen still being shared?
I was just going to say you can stop sharing if you want.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Sorry. All right.
There you go.
Perfect. There we go. So, so you need to look up what the Canadian requirements are for entry of a watercraft before you travel. So they have a memorandum D-19-85 that states that boats and equipment must be cleaned of aquatic plants, animals, mud, and debris, drained of water, and dry upon arrival at the border. And so just keeping in mind that different states also have different aquatic invasive species law too, and it's always a good recommended action to look up the laws of the place where you are traveling so that you can be prepared to be in compliance. And so, that's just a great pointer overall.
Some great information. We get a lot of people that travel north of the border, so something good to be aware of.
Yeah. And sometimes they are requesting that you do have proof of decontamination upon arrival as well. Minnesota DNR does not have any type of form or documentation for people to do that at this time. We are working closely with with our Canadian partners, and at this time, kind of what we've decided to do is that if you do visit a decontamination station before traveling to Canada, you certainly can take a photograph of that decontamination being done when have your boat in the picture and maybe the person who's doing the decon. So at least you have the photograph at this time, and there may be something else that comes later, but as of right now, Minnesota does not have any type of documentation to provide to Canada.
Good to know. If you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A section if you could. We get a comment from Paul, kind of along the same lines of working with other manufacturers or other countries. Paul's wondering, are you making any inroads with manufacturers of wake boats and other personal watercraft so the vessels will completely drain after use?
So I am not currently, but there are maybe I know Adam Dahl at one point was working closely with wake sport boats, companies and manufacturers. So currently, I'm not sure who is continuing on that work at this time, but there has been some work with that, but it is not, I don't have up-to-date information on that at this time.
Sounds like a legislative and probably marine manufacturers
Yeah,
goal, but
right.
I keep looking into that. So I think that's all we got for questions. You did a fantastic job. You covered all of them. I really enjoyed the pictures and presentation. I get asked a lot, doing fishing programs about, what weed is this, what aquatic plant is that, and having those pictures handy is great. So
Yeah, in the way the laws are written for watercraft transportation, you don't need to be an expert in plant identification because it just states that all aquatic plants must be removed, so native or non-native. Another thing to keep in mind too, when you're thinking about aquatic plants that are attached to your boat and trailer, is even if it is a native plant, zebra mussels oftentimes do attach to aquatic vegetation. So, you might be cleaning weeds off your boat one day and take a look and, oh my goodness, there's zebra mussels on there. And so removing those plants also could be a potential way for you to remove those zebra mussels as well.
that's a great suggestion and tip. That's good news.
I did leave out here, I kind of forgot to mention this interesting point. In 2024, there were 838 authorized watercraft inspectors in the state of Minnesota. Only 75 of those inspectors were DNR inspectors. The other 763 inspectors were employed by the 60 local and tribal governments with delegated authority by Minnesota DNR. And statewide last year, Minnesota inspected 451,551 watercraft. So getting up there to close of 500,000 watercraft inspections last year, which makes Minnesota's program one of the largest in the nation.
That's amazing. This is like fascinating numbers just to think of how many people are out there just doing their part to help protect our waters. So
Yeah.
really appreciate all you're doing and the whole program as a whole. It's a fantastic program and keep everything safe and clean out there in the waters. So
Yeah, we're getting ready for our busy time of the year. July tends to be our highest number of inspections. We're hopefully finally getting out of this rainy season we've been stuck in, and the water temperatures are going to warm up. So hopefully you get a chance to get out on the water. Ask any questions you may have to, the watercraft inspector. Certainly feel free to reach out to me if you're transporting water-related equipment. Do you have more questions? Or you can reach out to my counterparts in the other regions of the state. Thank you so much for having me today.
you bet. Yeah, remember everybody getting out and leading by example is great. So bring your kids with, bring your friends and family out in the water, enjoy it while you can, and go through the watercraft inspection and tell them what you're doing and demonstrate by example. So join us next week. We're going to talk about living with wildlife. Brandon's going to join us and talk a little bit about wildlife and conflicts we have with wildlife in our neighborhoods and with our gardens and all that stuff. So give you some good tips on how to prevent that, and we'll go from there. Everybody have a safe and lovely weekend outside. It looks like it's going to be a hot one out, so have fun. Hopefully everybody can get outside and enjoy some of the great outdoors. We'll talk to you next week.